Shri Shri Radha Krishna Gopa Gopinath Shamakunda Radha Kund Giri Govardhan Ki Jai. Vrindavan Dham Ki Jai. Mayapur Navadvip Dham Ki Jai. Ganga Mai Ki Jai. Yamuna Mai Ki Jai. Bhakti Devi Ki Jai. Tulsi Maharani Ki Jai. Samaveda Bhakta Vrinda Ki Jai. Gaura Premanandi.
Hari Hari Bol.
All glories to the assembled devotees.
Hare Krishna.
All glories to the assembled devotees.
Hare Krishna.
All glories to the assembled devotees.
Hare Krishna.
All glories to the lotus feet of Sri Sri Guru and Sri Gauranga. All glories to Srila Prabhupada. Okay, Hare Krishna. Good morning and greetings from Sri Ram Mayapur. We continue our study of Srimad Bhagavatam. We're on the first canto, the 15th chapter, and today's verse is 36. Yada mukundo bhagavan imam mahim jahau svatanva shravaniya satkataha tadaha eva praptibuddha chetasam abhadrahetu kalir anvavartata. Yada mukundo bhagavan imam mahim jahnau svatan vashravaniya satkataha tadahar eva pratibuddha chetasam abhadra hetu kalir anvavartata. Yada mukundo bhagavan imam mahim jahau svatanva shravaniya satkataha tadahar eva pratibuddha chetasam abhadra hetu kalir anvavartata. Please chant.
Hare Krishna. Yada makundo bhagavan imam mahi jaho swatanva shramani yasatkataha tada hareva pratibadha chetasam abhadra hetu kaliranva vartata.
Yada mukundo bhagavan imam mahim jahau svatanva shravaniya satkatha tada hareva pratibuddha chetasam abhadra hetu kaliranva vartata.
Yada mukundo bhagavan imam mahin jaho svatanva shravaniya satkatha tada hiriva pratitbuddha chetasam abhodraketu kalir anvavartata.
Hare Krishna. Yada mukundo bhagavan imam mahi jaho shvatanva shravaniya satkataha tadahariva pratibuddha chetasam avhadrahituhu kalir anvavartata. Hare Krishna.
Yada mukundo bhagavan imam mahim jaho svatanva shravaniya satkatha tadahar eva pratibuddha chetasam abhadra hetu kaliranva vartata.
Anyone else? Okay. Yada, when, Mukundaha, Lord Krishna, Bhagavan, the personality of Godhead, Imam, this, Mahim, earth, Jahau, left, Svatanva, with his self-same body, Shravaniya Satkataha, hearing about him is worthwhile. Tada, at that time. Aha, Eva, from the very day. Aprapti buddha chetasam, of those whose minds are not sufficiently developed. Abhadra hetuhu, cause of all ill fortune. Kalihi anvavartata, Kali, fully manifested. Translation. When the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Lord Krishna, left this earthly planet in his self-same form, from that very day, Kali, who had already partially appeared, became fully manifest to create inauspicious conditions for those who are endowed with a poor fund of knowledge. Purport by Srila Prabhupada. The influence of Kali can be enforced only upon those who are not fully developed in God consciousness. One can neutralize the effects of Kali by keeping oneself fully under the supreme care of the personality of Godhead. The age of Kali ensued just after the battle of Kurukshetra, but it could not exert its influence because of the presence of the Lord. The Lord, however, left this earthly planet in his own transcendental body, and as soon as he left, the symptoms of Kali Yuga, as were envisioned by Maharaj Yudhishthira prior to Arjuna's arrival from Dvaraka, began to manifest, and Maharaj Yudhishthira rightly conjectured on the departure of the Lord from the earth. As we have already explained, the Lord left our sight just as when the sun sets, it is out of our sight. Translation again. When the personality of Godhead, Lord Krishna, left this earthly planet in his self-same form, from that very day, Kali, who had already partially appeared, became fully manifest to create inauspicious conditions for those who are endowed with a poor fund of knowledge. Nama Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prastaya Bhutale Srimate Bhaktivedanta Swami Namane Namaste Saraswate Devi Gauravana Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Paschati Deshatani. Om Ajnana Tamiram Dasya Gyananjana Shalakaya Chakshur Amadikam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurve Namaha Vanchakalpatrubhyas Chakrapa Sindhubhya Eva Chapatitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha. Okay. So, today it looks like we're going to talk about the effects of Kali Yuga. On this subject matter, there's a really great verse from the first canto, from the first chapter, the 10th verse. So I'm going to read that verse and some of its purport, and then we'll talk more about what the effects of Kali Yuga are. And of course, how we can free ourselves from the effects of Kali Yuga, because that's also a nice thing. So the verse 1:10 is, O learned one, in this iron age of Kali, men have but short lives. They're quarrelsome, lazy, misguided, unlucky, and above all, always disturbed. Oh, thank you for that. And then the part of the purport I'll read is just at the end. Starting with, in this age, men are victims. I think it's the last paragraph. There you go. Yeah. Okay. Thank you. In this age, men are victims not only of different political creeds and parties, but also of many different types of sense gratificatory diversions, such as cinemas, sports, gambling, clubs, mundane libraries, bad association, smoking, drinking, cheating, pilfering, bickerings, and so on. Their minds are always disturbed and full of anxieties due to so many different engagements. In this way, many unscrupulous men manufacture their own religious faiths, which are not based on any revealed scriptures. And very often, people who are addicted to sense gratification are attracted by such institutions. Consequently, in the name of religion, so many sinful acts are being carried out, on that the people in general have neither peace of mind nor health of body. The student brahmachari communities are no longer being maintained, and householders do not observe the rules and regulations of the grihastha ashram. Consequently, the so-called vanaprasthas and sannyasis who come out of such grihastha ashrams are easily deviated from the rigid path. I'm going to talk a little bit about this bit because this is important. So, beginning with the brahmachari communities, right? So, the very beginning of life, we're meant to understand who we are, actually, not just our conditioned nature, but our constitutional nature, right? So we are to understand that we are spirit soul, we are eternally servants of Krishna, that is sambandha, and then we are to act accordingly, right? So the culture of education should be to understand this, to understand who we are, what our nature is, who Krishna is, and then how to act accordingly in order to serve Krishna properly, right? So this is what the brahmachari communities are meant for. Now, unfortunately, especially in this age of Kali, this isn't a very popular concept because in the age of Kali, especially in the current phase of this age of Kali, people are more worried about economic development than they are about spiritual advancement. And so the idea is that if we citizens of the world are not engaged in economic development so that we can support our families, that we're actually being irresponsible, right? We don't take into consideration the instructions from Sri Upanishad that point out very clearly that everything is controlled and owned by the Supreme Lord, and everyone is given their quota, and they should accept their quota and then use it accordingly. Understanding that the Lord gave it to us. Instead, we have this system where we are made to think that we are the doers, right? That's what this material world's all about. We misused our free will to try our hand at being independent from the Supreme Lord. So here we are in this material world. We think that we're in control and that we can enjoy certain things separately from Krishna. We ignore this Isavasya principle that's spoken about in Sri Upanishad. And so since our new conditioned aim of life is just all about economic development, all about the artha, right? So in the Vedas, we understand that there's dharma, artha, kama, and moksha, right? These days, most people in general, I was about to say human society, but it's actually subhuman society. We wouldn't even really call it a society because that's too nice of a word. That's more of anyway, it's a mess is what it is. But the point is that these lost living entities are struggling to maintain their existence. They don't realize that everything comes from Krishna. It's actually quite stressful to think that everything comes from our own efforts because we can't produce anything. Not a blade of grass moves without Krishna's will. So whether we're putting forth, a whole lot of effort to maintain our family, or we're putting forth zero effort, Krishna is actually the one that's maintaining everything. So everything that's going to come is coming from him. So since we have this state of conditioning, we tend to think that these early years of our life should be geared toward helping us become productive cogs in the machine of this material world. So instead of cultivating spiritual realization as Srila Prabhupada said, the education system these days is a slaughterhouse. So it just completely ignores anything about the soul, anything about God, anything about the relationship between the two, and anything about the process in order to get back to him. And it very loosely actually focuses on how to become productive in society. It's not even a good system for that, honestly. I mean, those of us who've gone through the public school system realize that it's not even that great for that specific purpose. But that's at least their aim. They don't aim any higher than that. So since these are no longer being maintained, the brahmachari communities, right? Then as a result of that, then also the householders don't observe rules and regulations of the Grihastha ashram. That's the next part of that report. So, and this is because, again, we don't have a proper understanding of what the true goal is. We think that the goal is to accumulate wealth and to accumulate sense gratification, right? So after we learn how to accumulate sense gratification in school, which, as I said, we don't actually learn many things in the public school system. We have to then get some sort of additional training, or most people that are actually the most productive dropped out of school and took up a trade when they were quite young, and then they became fairly successful. Those who have high paying jobs had to go through a whole lot of additional training, etc. So it's a very precarious situation. Not many people are living comfortably right now. I think everyone has experience of that. So since that focus isn't there, then when one becomes a householder, then they're not really encouraged or enthusiastic about following rules and regulations. They figure, look, this is what I've been working to figure out how to do, and so I'm just gonna, work as hard as I can and enjoy as much as I can, and that's my right. They don't have a regard for spiritual life in general, and this is why Srila Vyasadeva was despondent, right? He compiled all these Vedic literatures that reach down to the deepest depths of human existence and subhuman existence to try to bring people to this understanding of Krishna consciousness and try to inspire them in that way, bring them closer to Krishna. And in doing so, he gave a whole lot of concessions. You can do this, but do it this way. You can do that, but do it this way, right? And so Narada Muni pointed out that, well, people are going to take these concessions, but they're not going to pay any regard at all to the regulations. And they're going to think that they're following a spiritual process because they read it in a book that was geared toward bringing one to spirituality. So in other words, they'll do all of the different exceptions, but they won't follow the rules. So only take the concessions, not following the principle. And so as such, Narada Muni then advised Srila Vyasadeva to give a Purana which is just completely focused on bhakti, no concessions whatsoever. In other words, if one comes to the conclusion that, okay, I want to surrender to Krishna, now what do I do? Then give them a book. You've already written so many books for all these other people in these different modes of nature and these different stages of life. Now you give one to the people who have already come to the conclusion, we want to serve Krishna, and it's just about bhakti, right? So thus we have Srimad Bhagavatam. And so back to this then. So the householders these days, honestly, most of them are just struggling to get by, first of all. They're not even in a position where they feel comfortable enough to try to engage in anything beyond their accumulation of wealth. There's not really many activities that are beyond, just struggling to make ends meet, unfortunately. So, but if they do have time, then they just engage in sense gratification because they feel it's their right. This is what they were working for, right? And so engage in sense gratification. Then Srila Prabhupada continues, consequently, the so-called vanaprasts and sannyasis who come out of such grihastha ashrams are easily deviated from the rigid path, right? So we can see this too. These are all very observable points that Srila Prabhupada is making. So vanaprast, generally, of course, for us, it means that you get to this stage of life where you no longer have to accumulate wealth, so you retire. That's the retirement part. And then the vana part means that you should go out of the city or the village, at least to the outskirts, not in the middle of the social scene. Vana means forest, but it could be the forest, or it could just be on the outskirts of town, etc., depending on what your situation is. So it means that you retire not only from acquiring wealth, but you also retire from society, from social, dealings, right? From regular social dealings. And so so that's in the Vedic sense. In the sense that we have now when people retire. So when I was little, my family lived on the East Coast, just outside of Philly, but we had other family on the West Coast in Arizona. And so sometimes we would make a road trip to go, and like one year we had to go and pick up two of my half brothers from Arizona and drive them back to Pennsylvania. And so we made a few road trips. And on these road trips, we see, because it's summertime, in between the school years when we would make those trips. And so all over on the road, we would see these caravans, Winnebagos, right? And these were the retired people. So we would stop at the rest stops, and there would be just this rows and rows of these Winnebagos, camper vans, basically. And they're retired people, old people who retired from work. They bought this Winnebago, and they finally got a chance to travel around and see all the things that they never got to see in their life, right? So this was a fairly common thing back then, very observable. Nowadays, people don't even get to that point. It's quite rare for someone to be in a position where they can do that and, just get a vehicle like that and travel around. It's quite rare compared to how it was back then. And so now, and I have experience of this too, what I've seen people want to do once they're able to comfortably retire. First of all, unfortunately, many people end up working so much later than they expected to. But the ones who are fortunate enough that they put enough money aside and they have enough into their retirement fund that they can actually live off of, what they can collect for a period of time. All they want to do, the ones that I've had experience with, is sit on their couch and watch TV. They don't want to do anything else. They figured, okay, I worked really hard my whole life, and now I just want to relax. That's all I want to do. I want to sit here and be entertained by the television. Done. That's it. They don't want to travel. They don't want to do any of that. So it's even worse than because Vanaprastha is meant for them focusing on spirituality. So Brahmachari is first to focus on spirituality, to understand what the Sambandha is, understand what the Abhideya is, understand who we are, who Krishna is, what the process is to get back to Krishna, and start engaging in that. And if we do that properly, then throughout our Grihastha ashram, we are able to at least keep that focus that we learned in the Brahmachari ashram. Sure, we're engaging in acquiring wealth and supporting the family, but we have the right consciousness that the proper goal of life is to return back home, back to Godhead, to re-engage in Krishna's service. And then, but it takes a lot of time to maintain a family. So although the focus is there on Krishna, there's still a whole lot of activity that's going on. So that's the Grihastha ashram. Then for Vanaprastha and Sannyas, it's meant to be that you leave those things behind, and now it's the focus. So it goes from a focus, but with a lot of things going on, to now get rid of those things that are going on and just, this is the focus, and now cultivate spiritual life. So in the modern setup, they don't want to cultivate spiritual life. They just want to relax, or at best, if they can afford it, they just want to go around and enjoy. So it has nothing to do with spiritual growth. Again, then continuing Srila Prabhupada's purport. In the Kali Yuga, the whole atmosphere is surcharged with faithlessness. Men are no longer interested in spiritual values, right? We can very easily observe that as well. They're only interested in material sense gratification. Continuing. Material sense gratification is now the standard for civilization. For the maintenance of such material civilizations, man has formed complex nations and communities, and there is a constant strain of hot and cold wars between these different groups. It has become very difficult, therefore, to raise the spiritual standard due to the present distorted values of human society. The sages of Naimisaranya are anxious to disentangle all fallen souls, and here they are seeking the remedy from Srila Sutta Goswami. Right? So we see that the standard of living here in Kali Yuga has become completely focused on materialism. Not that the material world isn't generally already based on materialism, but it's become much more gross to the point where not many people have any interest at all in the spiritual standard. If at all, they just want to pay lip service to it because they want to feel like their life isn't a complete waste, and that at some point there's going to be some sort of spiritual goal that's going to be attained. But they don't cultivate knowledge in that area. So as it was said earlier, let's see, where was that? Oh, the whole atmosphere is surcharged with faithlessness, and then men are no longer interested in spiritual values. So, and then I thought it said something about, oh, maybe not. So being no longer interested in spiritual values, faith then is, we talked about this last week and a couple weeks ago about Laukika Shraddha and Shastriya Shraddha. So faith is an important thing to understand. We have to understand that that faith is essential, but we have to know where to put our faith and how to strengthen that faith. And the way to strengthen faith is to study Shastra. Shastriya Shraddha comes from, it means that your faith is now backed up by enough Shastra that came in disciplic succession that you can explain why you do the things you do, right? We explain that on the Kanishta platform, faith is very shaky. On the Madhyama platform, there's a little bit of connection with Shastra, but you still can't necessarily, in other words, your faith won't be shaken, but you can't necessarily defeat anyone who challenges you. They won't be able to shake you from your faith, but you won't be able to defeat them based on Shastra. And then the Uttama Adhikaris, then they have such strong and backed up faith by Shastra that they can't be shaken, and they can also very clearly explain all of the reasons why they're doing things, and they can also convince others like that. And so we also talked about last week. We talked about where we get our nourishment from, right? There were two quotes that I gave last week about the root of sin and the root of spiritual advancement. And the root of sin, it was a quote at the very end of Isopanishad Mantra 1 purport, where Srila Prabhupada wrote that the root of sin is deliberate disobedience of the laws of nature by disregarding the proprietorship of the Supreme Lord, right? So essentially what it means is misusing our free will, going from our real ego, which is I am servant of Krishna, to false ego, I am independent from Krishna, and I can independently control and enjoy. And so when we make that shift from the real ego to the false ego, or the polluted consciousness, then we get our nourishment from the three modes of material nature. We no longer get our nourishment from the internal potency, right? We're getting it from the external potency. So, and where we get our nourishment from means what we value, where we are going to get further cultivation, right? And so if we're being cultivated by the three modes of material nature, it means we're going to get drug around by the three modes of material nature, right? And so the way it connects to today's verse is materialism means that consciousness, that material consciousness, it's always feeding on the three modes of material nature, and there can't be any enlightenment whatsoever. And so as a result of that, things like the effects of the age of Kali will have a huge impact on us, right? But if our faith is in Krishna, then the second quote was the roots root of self-realization. Sorry. The root of spiritual advancement. This one was a quote from Bhaktivinoda Thakur, and it was inquiry into the supreme reality is the root of spiritual advancement. So the root of spiritual advancement means when we're engaging our real ego, understanding Krishna, and inquiring into the supreme, obviously through a bona fide spiritual master, reading through the Shastras, following the examples of the sadhus. And so when we get our nourishment from there, then that's what's being cultivated. And then so we're not so affected by the three, depending on, because right now we're getting nourishment from both. We're getting it from the modes of material nature because we still value it. We still think we're independent. We still think we're in control. And we're also getting some nourishment from the spiritual side, right? And so there's this sort of constant struggle that's going on. So as long as we're getting nourishment from the material end, we will suffer the results of that, right? And it's not a punishment. It's just the way things work. That's where you get your nourishment from. That's how things work here, right? And if the nourishment comes from there, that's how things work there. There's another quote I wanted to read before we dive into this purport. It's from 1:1:16, just a few verses after the one we read. Again, it's talking about some symptoms of Kali. And so in his purport, Srila Prabhupada writes, the age of Kali is the most condemned age due to its quarrelsome features. Kali Yuga is so saturated with vicious habits that there is a great fight at the slightest misunderstanding. Those who are engaged in pure devotional service to the Lord, who are without any desire for sense or self-aggrandizement, and who are free from the effects of fruit of actions and dry philosophical speculations, are capable of getting out of the estrangements of this complicated age. Oh, thank you for bringing that up. So again, this verse shows what the features of Kali Yuga are, and it also shows how to get out of that, right? So those who are engaged in the pure devotional service of the Lord, who are without any desire for self-aggrandizement, and who are free from the effects of fruitive actions and dry philosophical speculations, so no karma, no jnana, are capable of getting out of the estrangements of this complicated age, right? So then, back to today's purport. So the influence of Kali can be enforced only upon those who are not fully developed in God consciousness. One can neutralize the effects of Kali by keeping oneself fully under the supreme care of the personality of Godhead, right? So neutralizing this, the effects of the age of Kali. So I was going to focus this class on something else, and then I realized it's actually coming up in like the next couple of chapters. So we're going to be really delving into that then. So I'm just going to briefly mention it instead of, focusing the whole class on it. And then we'll get to one more point in this purport. But Srila Prabhupada teaches us through Srimad Bhagavatam that the symptoms of the age of Kali can't exist. And it's a pastime that's coming up in the next couple of chapters. But they can't exist where there's no animal slaughter going on, no illicit sex going on, no intoxication going on, no gambling going on. And the fifth one is where gold is hoarded. So Kali, the symptoms of Kali can only exist in those 5 places. Basically, if anywhere any of the 4 regular principles are being broken, or where gold is being hoarded. It doesn't mean stored. It means people are putting it aside and thinking it's mine, and it's hoarded like that. And that just means wealth. It doesn't, most people don't have gold to hoard. But if you're hoarding wealth and thinking in terms of I, me, and mine, or engaging in any of these 4 sinful activities, then the symptoms of Kali have effect. So the idea is that if we engage in Krishna consciousness, like it says here, we can neutralize the effects of Kali by keeping oneself fully under the supreme care of the personality of Godhead. So if we take nourishment from the root of self-realization instead of the root of sin, then we no longer actually feel the effects of the three modes of material nature, of the age of Kali. This is how basically all problems in life are resolved, just by properly engaging in Krishna consciousness. Because that's where all of our problems come from ignoring Krishna consciousness, from going from Krishna consciousness to self-consciousness, from living a God-centric lifestyle to a self-centric lifestyle. So that's where all of our problems come from. And all of our problems are resolved by redirecting that consciousness back to our original consciousness. I am servant of Krishna. Right? So the effects of Kali Yuga can be neutralized by developing and maintaining a proper consciousness or Krishna consciousness. As long as we maintain a polluted consciousness, the material consciousness, considering ourselves independent from the Lord, we draw nourishment from the three modes of material nature, which continually contributes to our perpetual bondage to this world, right? So wherever we're drawing nourishment from, that's the fruits of the results. Now, this purport ends talking about the sun. So Srila Prabhupada ends it. As we have already explained, the Lord left our sight just as when the sun sets, it is out of our sight. So the Lord is always there. Krishna is in everything, in every atom, right? So it's not that he's gone. It's that when we misused our free will, we stepped into a shadow, right? So the sun's always there, but there's also shade. And so we can choose to be in the shade or we can choose to be in the light. And so misuse of free will means that we're ignoring the light and we walk into the shade. That's how that works. So because of our polluted consciousness, we opted to live in the shadow, right? Ignorant of the light. But once we accept and embrace that light, the effects of Kali Yuga, the effects of the modes of nature, all of our unnatural conditioning become neutralized and we return to, to our original pure consciousness. So the point is that we have to always remember Krishna and never forget him, right? If we do that, then there's never any issue. So if we keep Krishna in our thoughts, in our words, in our actions, and most importantly, in our intentions, then there's no question of material suffering because there's no question of material identification, right? If we're completely identifying as spirit, then there's no question of material suffering because we're not identifying with material nature, right? Now, of course, this shouldn't be our motive, right? We shouldn't want to go back to Krishna because this place is uncomfortable, because it's a place of suffering, right? That shouldn't be our motive. If our motive is like that, then we actually don't become qualified to go back to the spiritual world. We may become qualified to merge into the Brahmajyoti if we can control our senses, if we can give up all material attachments, etc. But our motive shouldn't be to get out of this world. The motive should be that we want to serve Krishna because that's our natural state. And no matter what the circumstance, we're just interested in just serving Krishna back to our original state. And if we do that, the fun part is that it doesn't matter then if we're still in the material world, because with spiritual consciousness, since we're not identifying with the material body anymore, none of the material suffering has effect on us anymore. It's not that bad material things don't happen. We see examples of this all the time, very elevated personalities. For example, Jayapataka Maharaj, right? He's going through so many different health issues. So one might say, someone so advanced that, why isn't Krishna taking care of his health, or, like this? Why is this happening? Why is it like that? But he's not affected by it at all. So it doesn't matter that he has all these ailments. He's still giving classes in 2 languages simultaneously. I don't know if anyone's heard his classes recently, but he's still completely on point. He's giving half the class in English and half of it in Bengali because the audience is both English and Bengali. And so he thinks in both languages and can present our philosophy spotlessly in both languages. And so it's not holding him back from his service, right? It's not an issue. He's not identifying with the body, therefore he doesn't have material suffering. Externally, it may look like he's externally suffering, but we can see that he's actually not. He's not in a state of suffering at all. Another example is Kadambakanana Maharaj, who recently found out that he has terminal cancer. So he's currently staying in Vrindavan, and he's just completely focused on his service. That's it. It's not affecting him in a negative way. He said, okay, well, everybody's got to die. I know how much time I have, and so let's just continue our devotional services as properly as possible, not disturbed one bit by the external situations. So this is to be our consciousness. This is where we want to get to. We want to get to the point where it doesn't matter where we are. We just want to serve Krishna. So we shouldn't necessarily be, in other words, we can be motivated. That's okay to get out of this material world. That's, to understand that we don't belong here. We're eternal beings and this is a temporary place. Then, okay, we can use that as a motivation to then focus on spirituality. That's fine. But if that's our only motive, then it's actually not qualifying us to go back to this spiritual world. At best, like I said, Brahmajyoti. So the solution to this, of course, is just to focus on understanding who Krishna is, right? Really focus on that sambandha. Because if we know who we are, part and parcel of Krishna, infinitesimally small, and we know who Krishna is, the source of all spiritual material worlds, infinitely big, we are just part and parcels. And not only is he just the source of everything, but he's completely awesome. It's not that he's, some grumpy old man that we all just came from and no, he has unconditional love for us. He expanded this material world because we wanted to live separately from him. And there's no such thing as separate from Krishna. So instead of blinking us out of existence, which is basically what we were asking for, because independent from Krishna means you don't exist anymore, he expanded his body and he expanded an illusion to make us think that we're actually not really dealing with him. We think we're dealing independently in that shadow. But everything we're doing is we're manipulating parts of him and exploiting him in order to forget him, right? So that just shows how much unconditional love he has for us, right? And that's for the rebellious living entities who chose to forget him, how much love he has for us. So imagine how much love he has for the devotees who actually serve him voluntarily and love him. And so he actually becomes, he said he's conquered and overwhelmed by pure love and devotion, that he actually becomes controlled by the pure devotees. Like here in the material world, we are trying to control God, right? We're trying to control everything. But we can't with that mentality. As soon as we have the mentality, it's so ironic and funny. As soon as we get rid of that mentality of controlling and enjoying, and we just surrender, we want to serve Krishna with love, then actually he comes under our control, right? All of these different pastimes, all the different forms he takes, they're based on how he wants to reciprocate with a particular devotee, right? So all of the different variety, it's there because of the devotee. He's self-centered. He's self-satisfied. He doesn't need anything. But because he has so many different devotees that have so many different tendencies, proclivities, natures, then he adjusts himself according to each of his devotees. So it's quite amazing. He's quite amazing. He's actually quite easy to fall in love with once you understand who he is, what he does, etc. So learning about him through the Shastra, through our guru, and by engaging in proper sadhu sangha, actually finding like-minded devotees, understanding what their connection is with Krishna, and then taking that connection and also transferring it into ourselves, becoming connected to Krishna ourselves in the line of these sadhus. This helps establish that root of spiritual advancement, and that's therefore we can get our nourishment from there. And then therefore, just as a side effect, then all of the symptoms of the age of Kali are nullified, and the three modes of material nature no longer have an effect. So that's just like a happy side effect. It shouldn't be our motive, but we can use it to at least shift our focus from what we're currently doing in material life to what we should be doing in spiritual life. So that's there. That's okay. And it's, it's a good motivator. Anything to get us from material consciousness to Krishna consciousness is good. So if that's what our motive is at first, okay, then start understanding about Krishna through the Shastra. But eventually we'll see that we'll actually just start really wanting to serve Krishna. Not that I don't want to be here. No, we want to serve Krishna. And so whether it's here or there or wherever, it won't matter. And so, okay, let me see if there was anything else there. No, I'll just read that first bit and that last bit, or not just the first bit really. So the influence of Kali can be enforced only upon those who are not fully developed in God consciousness. One can neutralize the effects of Kali by keeping oneself fully under the supreme care of the personality of Godhead. So just getting our nourishment from the spiritual realm by spiritual inquiry, and not getting our nourishment from the three modes of nature by disregarding deliberate disobedience of the laws of nature, by disregarding the proprietorship of the Supreme Lord. Okay, so we'll stop there and see if anyone has any questions.
If anybody has any questions, please just raise your hands or just unmute yourself and go ahead. When you were...
I tried to keep it simpler this time.
No. You explained it really,
Hopefully.
really well. So when you were reading that list of qualities of Kali Yuga, a lot of times I'm thinking, oh, I don't do this, I don't do this, I don't do this, I don't do this. And then the very last one, bickerings, and I thought, there we go. All of us are affected. A lot of times we tend to think, oh, everybody else is affected with this, that, or something else. But there are a lot of qualities that even we are affected by, and we really have to work hard on getting, trying to not get caught up in those situations. But I like the way you explained how we ended up here and how kind Krishna is in expanding this. Even his illusion was expanded to give us that facility because we rebelled. And when you're talking about unconditional love, that is unconditional love. And hopefully we will come to our senses and go back to where he is so we can serve him in some capacity. Mother Vindhyavali?
Yes. Thank you very much, Prabhu, for the nice class. And a lot of things to know in this. We know that Krishna is very generous and he just takes care of us. But my one worry is, it is a silly one. You said, Kali sits in the gold. And from childhood, we are using gold. So what should I do now?
I missed the one part. What's the goal?
Kali sits in the gold. Is that right?
Oh, gold. Gold. Yeah. No, those who hoard gold. So if you're considering that gold yours, and then you're hoarding it and not using it in Krishna's service, then yeah, the symptoms of Kali exist there. In other words, if you're using it in Krishna's service, then it's fine.
No, from childhood, we always...
It's just the mentality.
But we wear the gold. What should do? What is that? What should we do now?
Yeah, that's that's there. Yeah, I read some statistic that I forget what an exact statistic was, but I think it was maybe a sixth or 10, I don't know, some percentage, a pretty high percentage of the world's gold is actually owned by Indian women. Because that's, from childhood, that's how it was. So, I mean, there's the thing where you have it, you use it. It depends on your consciousness, really. There's the story of, what was it? One of the queens, I think it's in Chaitanya Charitamrita, and she had a, very valuable nose ring, right? And she gave it to one deity. So there's things that we can do like that. Basically, it's the consciousness. If you can maintain your Krishna consciousness, understanding that, Krishna is the center of everything, and you can possess that gold and you can use it in service, then that's good. But one has to become convinced of that. The more important part is to be convinced of it than to get rid of it, right? So if you get rid of it without understanding that, in other words, let's say you feel guilty about it and you donate it to a temple or something, but you didn't have the consciousness of being completely detached, then it's Falgu Vairagya. So, of course, the temple will benefit, you'll benefit some, but you won't get full benefit until you're completely detached and, like that. But otherwise, if you have it and, you wear it as your decoration, you're also probably at some point going to, pass it off onto the next generation, etc. Then I don't know the full answer to that question because I don't own any gold. But but the idea is philosophically.
I didn't have anything like gold biscuits or something like that. We just use minimum for our girls, where they do have. But it's not much though, like you said. And then it goes to next generation like that. So,
Yeah,
and
so
I do.
Not an issue.
Yeah. So thinking of Krishna and devotional service and knowing about Krishna, I'm trying my best to do. But about the gold question, today you are saying that, that part I just had a silly question, but
Yeah, it'll come up again soon. But yeah, decorating yourself for Krishna, that's a good thing to do. So that's no problem. You have some gold, you're wearing it to decorate yourself for Krishna. Like I said, you'll be passing it on to the other generations. It's not an issue. Prananath Prabhu, yes.
Hare Krishna Prabhuji, thank you so much for the nice class. Can you please elaborate and explain a little bit on like-minded devotees, Prabhuji? When in reference to
Yes,
Guru Sadhu.
absolutely.
Yeah, please, thank you.
Yes, thank you for that. So sometimes I'll go off on this thing about what sadhu sangha means, because we have different ideas of what sadhu sangha means, and it's not just proximity. It's not just hanging out with a bunch of people who accept Krishna. The quality has to be there, and so it's in our best interest because there are many different types of devotees. We all have different types of motivations, right? And some of it's based on our conditioned nature. And, some of it's just based on, our constitutional nature. So whichever devotees that we can gain inspiration from, those are the ones that we should associate with. All right. So in other words, we respect all devotees. Anyone who accepts the Supreme Lord, even if they don't call him Krishna, anyone that accepts the Supreme Lord, they are to be respected. Maybe from a distance, maybe from up close, but to be respected. But the ones that we want to spend our time with are the ones that inspire us the most. So that's what it means by like-minded. Now, I will say, because there should be a disclaimer here, that it should be based on what inspires us in Krishna consciousness, not just that who our nature matches, right? So if I'm a nonsense neophyte, I don't necessarily want to just hang out with a bunch of other nonsense neophytes, because then nobody's making any advancement. But if I get inspiration from some particular devotees, right, and then I can understand how to apply that inspiration through, understanding what the qualities that they have and how it's connected to Krishna, and through that inspiration, I can also develop those qualities. Then that's proper sadhu sangha. So like-minded doesn't necessarily mean in the exact situation as you. It means that they have something that you admire in devotional service, right? Whatever area encourages you most. Some people are encouraged a lot by kirtan. Some people are encouraged by preaching, book distribution. Some people are encouraged by cooking. Others are just encouraged by, just doing menial service like that. Some, and then, obviously within all of these things, there are different subcategories too. Within book distribution, there's so many different approaches to book distribution that are all quite nice. And so, we just have to find devotees who can inspire us and to help us grow. And so that's what's meant by like-minded devotees. Not that we get stuck in our position because we're only hanging out with, the kind of people that, are exactly on the same level we are, but who have similar interests, similar values, but on a higher level. And so that's what I meant by like-minded devotees. Is that good?
Thank you, Prabhu. Thank you very much. Yeah.
Thank you. Thanks for asking that, because sometimes I only give part of what I'm talking about because I feel like I repeat myself a lot, but it is very important to note, and I try not to overwhelm everybody as well. But thank you for the question.
Hare Krishna. Thank you.
Anything else?
Doesn't look like, I don't see any other hands up. Thank you very much, Prabhu, and thank you for giving us this extra association today. Always good to hear from
Thank
you.
you.
It's
My
never,
pleasure.
so we will meet again tomorrow morning at 7:50 for another class. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Prabhu.
वाञ्छाकल्पतरुभ्यश्च
Hare Krishna.
कृपासिन्धुभ्यश्च पतितानां पावनेभ्यो
Yo,
वैष्णवेभ्यो
Vaishnaveभ्यो
नमो
नमः.
नमः. Hare Krishna.
Hare
Thank you.
Thank you, Prabhu.